Most PMP study plans you'll find were built for an exam that no longer exists. The test changed in 2026, and if your plan doesn't match it, you'll spend weeks studying the wrong things. So in this video, I'm giving you a real 8-week plan built for the new exam that tells you exactly where to spend your time. I teach this material at the graduate level, so this isn't a generic checklist. This is a plan weighted to how the new exam actually scores you. 8 weeks is the sweet spot for most people studying alongside a job, and near the end, I'll show you how to stretch the same plan if your weeks are tight. Before any schedule, you need to understand one thing, because it drives the whole plan. The PMP exam is not a memory test. It doesn't ask you to recite the guide. It hands you a short story about a project going sideways and asks what a good project manager does next. So the right answer is rarely a definition. It's a judgment call. That's why memorizing terms is just the table stakes, and it's why this plan is built to grow your instincts, not just your vocabulary. Here's a quick sense of how that feels. A question won't ask you to define a risk register. It'll say a team member quietly pulls you aside and admits a deadline is going to slip, and then it gives you 4 things you could do, and all 4 sound reasonable. Your whole job is to pick the best next move. Passing the PMP is mostly getting good at that one skill over and over, a couple hundred times in a row. Now the part that decides where your hours go. The exam is scored across 3 big areas: people, process, and business environment. On the new exam, those are weighted roughly 1/3 people, a little over 40% process, and about a quarter business environment. Look hard at that last one. It used to be a rounding error on the old exam, around 8%, and now it's a full quarter of your score. So a smart plan spends time in proportion to what's tested, instead of pouring hours into your favorite topics and hoping the rest sorts itself out. And one more idea runs underneath everything. Today's exam assumes you can work in more than one style. Of course, traditional projects where you plan it all up front, but also agile and hybrid, where you deliver in short cycles and adjust as you learn. Half or more of what you'll see leans that adaptive, non-traditional way. So as you move through this plan, keep both lenses in mind, the traditional or predictive way and the agile way, and build a feel for when each one fits. That act of adapting your approach to fit the project has a name that comes up constantly on the exam. It's called tailoring, and getting comfortable with it is half the battle. That's the foundation. Now, second stage, what you actually need for the exam. The plan moves in the order your brain actually learns best, and most people do it backwards. They either start hammering practice questions on day 1 before they know anything and just feel demoralized, or they try to memorize every process in the guide and burn out long before they've built any real judgment. We do neither. First, you set up and get your bearings. Then you build the core knowledge, people and process, because together, those are about 3/4 of the exam. Then you give business environment its own dedicated week, because it grew the most and it's the piece almost everyone shortchanges. Then you finish with heavy, realistic practice, because the last 2 weeks are where the points are actually won. 8 weeks, 4 stages, 1 runway. Week 1 is your pre-flight, and it's light on studying by design. You pick a target exam date, because a real date on the calendar turns someday into a plan. You choose 1 main study resource instead of hoarding 10, because 5 half-read books teach you less than 1 you actually finish. And you take a short practice test on day 1. Not to pass, you won't, and that's fine. You take it to get an honest baseline, so 8 weeks from now, you can see exactly how far you've come. The mistake people make here is skipping the setup and diving straight into content. Spend the hour. It saves you weeks. Weeks 2 and 3 are the people domain, which is about 1/3 of your score. This is leadership, building a team, coaching people, resolving conflict before it hardens, and keeping your stakeholders engaged and in the loop. Spend real time on the servant leadership mindset, where the manager clears roadblocks and supports the team instead of handing down orders, because the exam leans hard toward that style. And here's the classic trap. When a question offers you a controlling, take charge answer next to a quieter one where you coach the team or gather input, the empowering answer usually wins. If your gut keeps picking the boss who seizes control, retrain it this week. Weeks 4 and 5 are the process domain, the biggest slice at just over 40%. This is how the work actually gets planned and delivered. Scope, schedule, cost, quality, risk, procurement, and change. Every moving part of running a project. And this is where that tailoring idea earns its keep, because you learn each topic twice. You'll learn how things look on a traditional project with everything mapped up front, and how things look on an agile or hybrid project where you plan in smaller increments and adapt. The trap is studying only the traditional version, then freezing when a question drops you onto an agile team. If you answer like it's rigid waterfall when the scenario is clearly adaptive, you'll lose points you studied hard for. Note, by the end of week 5, you've covered roughly 3/4 of the exam's weight, and the plan shifts from learning new material to sharpening what you know. Week 6 is business environment, and I gave it an entire week on purpose because this is the part that tripled on the new exam, and it's still the part most study plans treat as a footnote. So let's be concrete about what actually lives here. Start with strategic alignment, the simple idea that a project only matters because it serves some bigger goal of the organization, and your job is to keep it pointed at that goal even when the day-to-day gets noisy. Then value delivery, which is the shift from did we finish the tasks to did we actually create something worth having. That distinction shows up all over the new exam, so train yourself to spot it. Then the guardrails, compliance, governance, and the outside forces like regulations or a shifting market that a project has to respect, whether you like them or not. And then the 2 themes that are genuinely new to this exam, artificial intelligence and sustainability. On AI, take a breath, because you are not being tested as an engineer. You're being tested on judgment. When does it make sense to let a tool help with something like drafting a schedule or flagging risks? Where does a human need to stay responsible for the actual decision, and how do you use it without quietly handing over your accountability? On sustainability, it's about weighing the longer-term and wider impact of your choices, not just the fastest route to done. You don't need deep expertise in either one. You need to recognize the responsible, level-headed answer when a scenario describes the situation. Give this week its full time because it's the cheapest points on the new exam. So few people study it properly that just showing up prepared puts you ahead. Week 7 has 2 main goals. The first is to pull agile and hybrid together into one clear picture, because those ideas thread through all 3 domains and you want them to feel like second nature rather than a separate subject you bolt on at the end. The second goal is the step almost everyone skips. You practice the new question formats on purpose. The exam now goes well beyond pick A, B, C, or D. You'll drag items into the right order, match things across 2 columns, click the correct spot on a picture, read an answer straight off a chart, and work through longer case studies where one detailed scenario feeds several questions in a row. None of these are actually harder than a normal question. They just punish you when they're unfamiliar, because you waste time fighting the mechanics instead of thinking about the answer. The fix is almost embarrassingly simple. Make sure exam day is not the first time you meet them. Then week 8 is your final approach, and it's all realistic practice. You take at least 2 full-length practice exams under real timing, the whole thing in one sitting, so your brain gets used to the marathon instead of the sprint. But the tests themselves aren't where the growth happens. The growth is in the review. For every single question you miss, you dig in until you understand why the right answer is right, and just as important, why yours was wrong, and then you write that reason down. That running list of mistakes becomes a map of your weak spots, and in the final days, you study only what's on that map. Reviewing your misses this way is hands down the single highest value thing you'll do in the entire 8 weeks. Everything before it was just set up for this. Now, what if 8 focused weeks isn't realistic? Maybe you're a working parent. Maybe your weeks are unpredictable. Don't force it. Treat these as 8 phases instead of 8 calendar weeks, and give each phase whatever real time you have, even if that stretches it to 12 or 16 weeks. The order still works. What matters is that you finish each phase before moving on, not that you hit it in 7 days. Slower and consistent beats fast and frazzled every time. And remember, you don't have to build any of this from scratch, because I already did it. So here's the whole thing in one breath. Study in proportion to what's tested. 1/3 people, a bit more process, a full quarter business environment. Build the core first, give business environment its own week, and spend the final stretch practicing real questions and the new formats. Do that, and you're not just studying hard, you're studying the right things in the right order. If this gave you a clear path, do 2 quick things. Subscribe to the channel, because I'll be walking through each piece of this plan in its own video in plain English. And if you want the entire detailed 8-week plan as a checklist you can follow, I'll send it to you free. Just sign up for this series newsletter, 1 email a week, and the 8-week plan lands in your inbox. The link is right below in the video description. In the next video, I'll be breaking down what really changed from PMBOK 7 to PMBOK 8. I'll see you there.